Time now for a check of what's making the front pages of the newspapers here in France, and I'm joined by Elena Casas. Good morning to you.
Morning again, Tom.
We're going to be looking at that very sad story, the 5 French soldiers killed in Afghanistan, and that's on pretty much all the front pages, I'm assuming, today.
Yes, it is, of course, the 14th of July today, Bastille Day, traditionally a day when France remembers its war dead. And so this is on all of France's front pages after those 5 soldiers were killed yesterday in Afghanistan. François has France in mourning as their headline. They've got every single one of the 69 French soldiers killed in Afghanistan since 2001. Their names and photos on that front page. Le Parisien has virtually the same headline, the 14th of July in mourning. Inside Le Parisien, they take a look in a little bit more detail on how those soldiers died 2 days ago on Tuesday. They say that they were at a meeting with local officials about policing when a suicide bomber burst in and insurgents then attacked with small arms fire, killing 4 of those French soldiers instantly alongside 4 Afghan civilians. They also have an interesting look at an interview with a strategy expert called Pascal Boniface, who says the Taliban seem to be growing in confidence after the assassination of Hamid Karzai's brother, also on Tuesday, and the progressive drawdown of Western troops from Afghanistan, which is going on now. He says we're bound to see more of these kinds of attacks as they grow in confidence, and he points out the war can't go on forever, and NATO just can't impose democracy on Afghanistan through war. So he says even though the level of violence seems to be going up, pulling foreign troops out of Afghanistan is the least bad course of action to take.
And do the other papers share that analysis? What's Le Figaro got there?
Well, right-wing Le Figaro is taking a pretty patriotic take on this story today. Again, they've got the French army in mourning with those 4 soldiers killed yesterday on those which have been identified. The 5th soldier hasn't, photographed on their front page. Inside, they say they died for France, which is engaged, Le Figaro says, in a struggle for freedom around the world, both in Afghanistan and in Libya. They say their deaths were worthwhile, and that one national day of homage to the France's soldiers isn't enough. They say we should be celebrating them every day.
And not surprisingly, perhaps, left-wing Libération has a rather different take on that patriotism argument.
Yes, they have really the opposite point of view. On the front of every other paper, we've got those dead soldiers, whereas on Libération, we've got an anonymous soldier, and the army beaten is their headline. They say those soldiers that died yesterday did not die for France or for freedom. They say it's more likely that they died for nothing. They say the Western intervention in Afghanistan has failed. We need to accept that civilization and democracy can't be installed at the barrel of a gun, Libération says. They point out the Afghan war has long had the support of French public opinion, first because it was seen as a struggle against al-Qaeda, and then because the French public believed it was worthwhile to try and install democracy and women's rights and so on in Afghanistan. But they say 10 years after the beginning of the conflict, the country is just as poor and chaotic as ever, and the Taliban seems stronger than ever, and the West is allied to an Afghan government which is involved in more and more corruption scandals. So Libération joins its voice to calls made by the Socialist Party yesterday for French troops to be withdrawn more quickly from Afghanistan, and they also question the motives, or rather the purpose of the French intervention in Libya in that editorial, drawing attention particularly to those accusations made by Human Rights Watch yesterday that the Libyan rebels may have been engaged in human rights abuses, and questioning whether France was right to give them such strong unconditional support.
So it's a very sad day on the 14th of July, which is traditionally a day of celebration by France's military. On a much lighter note, Le Parisien has a story about France, a sporting story this time.
Still bad news for France, though. This is about their women's football team who lost against the US in yesterday's World Cup semi-final. The paper says it's not all bad, though. They interview one of the defenders who says it's great that they got to the semi-final. They gave the Americans, who are the world champions, a good run for their money, and most importantly, they attracted a lot more public attention onto women's football. They got more French women out playing football. They got that media attention and support. And so the player that they've interviewed just says she hopes that they manage to keep women's football in the spotlight and that it doesn't turn out to be a passing trend.
All right. Thank you very much, Dee, for that wrap of the French press. Elena Casas.